Thanks very much for attending. Let me see, so I get the right documents here. I just briefed the member states, and I was very restrictive talking to them, so now I want to find the fully transparent version when I brief you. Here it is, yeah. I've had the opportunity this morning to congratulate the Russian Federation on a very successful presidency and, of course, a very successful World Cup. We'll try to follow them on both accounts. We have been talking about transparency and openness, but also about results and relevance of the Security Council since we took on our seat a year and a half ago. And part of that is making sure that the Security Council does the right things, and that there is transparency and openness, and that includes a very close conversation with you. So I just want to say at the outset that we intend to follow that tradition. As you know, Elisa and Carl and everyone else in my mission, including myself, is always available to you. And we'll try to keep that up also, of course, during the presidency. I want to say that there are serious divisions in the world. You are fully aware of them. And it is very difficult, unfortunately, for the Security Council not to, to step away or be more efficient than the divisions as they are. And, of course, they are reflected in the Security Council. That is a negative aspect of our work. Another one is that the situation in terms of respect, or rather disrespect, for international humanitarian law is really bad. And I think it is a case in point, if you look at Syria and Yemen and many other issues, South Sudan, that the failure of prevention is costing not only in human lives but also in credibility of the Security Council and the United Nations and the international community. So all of these things is something that, the presidency of a month cannot change that, but we are trying to at least remedy some of those trends the best we can. The limitations of a presidency are clearly there. I mean, we'll have to take a step back in terms of our national position and more be sort of the vehicle for council unity and be in the hands of the 14 other members. But I think there are two aspects of where the presidency can have a certain influence. One is when it comes to setting the agenda. And as you will hear, the agenda that we're trying to set is a reflection of the difficulties that I just explained. And the other aspect of our influence is, of course, in working methods of the Security Council. Now, some of that you are spared because they relate to how we interact with each other inside the closed consultations. And we have some ideas about how to improve that interaction, but I will not go through that to you. But I wanted to say that when it comes to the working methods, we've had as is customary, we have start out every presidency with a breakfast among ambassadors, and I've hosted such a breakfast this morning, which is an opportunity to go through the program of work before it's adopted. But it's also an opportunity, and I want to say that I really used that this morning to remind each and every one of my colleagues that it isn't just a privilege to serve on the Security Council, it's a very, very serious responsibility. We're all under instructions by our countries to defend and protect and put forward the national position. But we also represent a collective under the UN Charter in terms of maintaining peace, sustaining peace, preventing conflict. And that is in itself a huge responsibility. And I think we need to be honest with each other that we have not always been able to shoulder that. So it's a very strong point I made this morning, and I referred to the retreat that we organized in Sweden, in Backåkra, that sort of sense of commonality, of common purpose, of respect for each other, but also respect for the huge responsibility that is on our shoulders has to be the leading star of our work. As I said often, is that the Security Council members, us getting along and trying to work hard and collectively, is a necessary but not sufficient aspect of improving the action. But at least that is something that we have the power to try to improve here in New York. Yes, so that's on the responsibilities. We also want to, in our work, ensure that there's a very close relationship between the Secretary General and his office and the Security Council, and that includes making sure that we really come out in support of the mediation efforts that the Secretary General is involved in and his mediators. Yemen and Syria are two good cases in point. Speaking continuously about the working methods, we want to make sure that there are outcomes as often as possible. Even if we've had closed consultations, we do believe that we should always try to have something to communicate to you afterwards, and hopefully you would relay that to the rest of the world, to find meaningful common denominators in our deliberations, and we'll try to strive for that. We have a work program that you will see that is quite full, which is customary in July, unfortunately. But we also want to make room for the unexpected. Gambia was not among the countries' dossiers that we were specifically well briefed on when we took up the presidency last year, 1st of January 2017. And I just mentioned that because I think it was well handled in the end, but it just shows that you need to be ready to adapt quickly your priorities depending on situations erupting on the ground. Yemen and South Sudan are and Syria moving targets, and we will adjust our program of work if necessary. But I also think the Security Council should be responsive to positive developments. And what we are seeing right now in the Horn of Africa, if you look at Ethiopia and Eritrea, a rapprochement that I think no one was expecting. If the Council in any way can be supportive and encouraging that, it's something that we should really try to strive for. The other influence we might have is to set the agenda. And that is related to the horizontal issues that you will see in the program of work. There are three such issues that I wanted to mention to you. One is, and this is a reflection of the general deterioration of international humanitarian law, and not least the way children are the worst affected of that. And you've seen the report of the Secretary General last week about the negative trend of how children are more and more affected. So we have scheduled this debate, which will be chaired by my Prime Minister, Stefan Löfven, on the 9th of July. It was an open debate, so there'll be, I suspect, a lot of countries who want to contribute to that discussion. We expect that to take the entire part of that day. The focus is protecting children today prevents conflict tomorrow, so there's a combination of prevention and humanitarian law, if you like, here. And in the meanwhile, we are working on a resolution to be adopted the same day on children and armed conflict, which is trying to push this agenda forward and cover some of the ground that we believe is important, including prevention and protection. The other, the day after, on the 10th of July, and I just want to say I'm not going to go through the whole program with you, but I wanted to mention these horizontal issues because they relate to the crisis we are confronting in the world. On the 10th of July, we're going to look into the issue of women, peace and security. That will not surprise any of you, having followed our priority in this area since we joined the Security Council a year and a half ago. This is based on putting this agenda into a regional context, this time Sahel. Foreign Minister Margot Wallström will have traveled to Niger and Chad together with the Deputy Secretary General. And the idea is for them to come to the Security Council on the 10th of April, and Margot Wallström will chair that meeting, and Deputy Secretary General will be one of the briefers. They will focus on women, peace and security implementation on the ground in the Sahel. The third in that week of horizontal issues is another one of our priorities, and it's about climate and security. As you know, there is a lot of a very strong sense that climate change is affecting security in many countries. Many of you have reported that in your outlets. And we find that it's a bit of an anomaly that the Security Council is there to sustain peace, to prevent a conflict, and there hasn't been a true debate on the effects of climate change to security since 2011. And we know that there is a huge constituency out there of countries who feel that this is a void that has to be repaired and fixed. So we're organizing that debate, and I'll be very honest with you that there are some countries who are not applauding perhaps this initiative, also because they feel that there are other bodies in the UN system that are more democratic and open and encompassing the whole membership that should deal with this. We don't find that there is a contradiction. The Security Council needs to address issues that relate to peace and security, and if climate has an effect on that, which we believe, the Council should be better equipped to deal with it, and that is not at all in taking over the responsibility that other bodies have, including the General Assembly and other bodies. Final point I want to mention on this horizontal issues is the partnerships, and as you know, the UN is always better off when it comes to dealing with international peace and security if there is a credible and active regional organization to support the work. The partnership between African Union and the UN is key to that agenda. And we're very pleased that during our presidency, the African Union Peace and Security Council will hold their annual consultations with the Security Council in July. That's on the 18th and 19th of July. That is there are various formats to this. One is more informal, and one is formal. But the main thing here is that we can discuss common challenges. You will find that the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo situation, and the situation in South Sudan, issues that are on our agenda and that is on the African Union's agenda, will be high in our joint discussions, as will the more general relationship between our two bodies, including funding issues and other strategic issues that we're working on together. So I hope you find that and you understand why we've chosen those topics for our more general approach. On the geographic issues, I'm not going to go through the program, as I said, but just a few pointers to what will happen this month. Yemen is an ongoing situation that the Council has been following very closely. We will, unless something dramatic happens between now and Thursday is when this will be discussed in the Security Council next time. Myanmar, the Security Council visited not that long ago. We find it's very important that the situation is maintained on the agenda of the Council. On July 23rd, the new special envoy will be in the Council and make her first appearance with us after having spent some time in Myanmar. Obviously, I mentioned Ethiopia, Eritrea. If there are positive developments, we want to be encouraging those. Related to that is, of course, the sanctions relates to Somalia. They will be dealt with in the end of the month. South Sudan, again, we had a discussion on that only a few days ago. The next time is on Thursday. There is a discussion on the sanctions issues. We are, of course, very attentive to what's happening on the ground, but also in the regional context, the African Union Summit in Nouakchott and IGAD, etc. But that will be high on our agenda. Syria is always on the Security Council agenda. We will have 3 sessions, chemical tomorrow already, and humanitarian and political issues dealt with separately towards the end of the month. And finally, I wanted to mention Colombia, where, of course, there's been elections, a new government is coming in, and there is a discussion scheduled for this month also to assess how the Security Council, which has been very united on this, can continue to support the progress towards peace in Colombia in view of a new government coming in. So I think, colleagues, that I will close there and open for questions.
Ambassador, Mr. President, Sherwin Briceby, South African Broadcasting, and on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association, we wish you everything of the best for the month of July. Could you give us a sense of your interaction this morning? I mean, what were some of the responses, particularly from some of the countries that are perhaps deemed more responsible for undermining the multilateral system than others? I mean, what were some of the responses you got to the lecture you gave them this morning? And in addition to that, could you tell us which countries are objecting to the climate change debate?
Okay, thank you very much for your question. People seem to have a very fond memory of our interaction in Sweden, and don't seem to mind to be reminded of the fact that we have collective responsibilities apart from our national agendas. So that was a very general and a very generous and positive response to my. I wouldn't call it lecturing; it was more a reminder. On your other question, what countries there are, and I think you would know which they are. I mean, some countries, there are various standpoints here. One is on climate. Why shouldn't the Council deal with this? There are those who feel that this is an issue better dealt with in other fora. Some may think that this is an internal issue. Others may have the view that actually the Security Council is not a particularly democratic body with a veto and a limited membership, etc., and therefore we shouldn't entrust it with such important issues subject to veto, etc. So there might be different concerns, but I have to say that everyone on the Council currently have supported the approach we take to this, or at least said that they will not oppose it. And I think, we have listened very closely to the broader membership. There are many, many countries out there from, I think, all continents of the world who feel that this is an extremely important issue and that the UN is missing something and the Council is missing something unless we start understanding the connections between climate and security better. So I'm quite relaxed about that, but we're not asking for any major, new resolutions or groundbreaking PRSTs or anything like that. It's just that having the debate for the first time since 2011, it seems to me high time.
Michelle, please. Thanks, Ambassador. Michelle Nichols from Reuters. I just wanted to ask about the Myanmar consultations. There was some...
Myanmar.
Yeah, Myanmar. Mm-hmm. The Secretary-General has been there today not in Myanmar, in Bangladesh at the camps. He's calling for more international pressure on Myanmar to create the conditions safe for the return of some of the refugees. Are there any discussions happening among Council members on what to do next? And what do you think, in your national capacity, should happen?
Okay, thank you. Let's Michelle, thank you. Let's take one or two more questions and I'll try
James,
Yes, it's about something that's not happening at the Security Council on the 16th, which is a summit between President Trump and President Putin. What are you hoping that might achieve? Because clearly the tensions between those countries is part of what you were talking earlier on about the dynamics on the Security Council. And I guess I have to ask you this in your national capacity, because there isn't a unified position on Crimea. But President Trump... There's been hints that maybe he's going to change his position on recognising Russia's control of Crimea. Do you notice any other of your like-minded countries on the Council who are changing their position in any way?
Okay, thank you very much. On Myanmar, what happens next? What we hope, and now I was talking, of course, I think from a Swedish perspective, but I think it's pretty shared among Council members, that after a trip, etc., I think everyone hopes that there will be better conditions in Rakhine State, including for the possibility of Rohingya refugees to return back to Myanmar in safe and under voluntary conditions that are satisfactory for them. That implies building trust, which has not been there for good reasons. I mean, I can understand why Rohingyas don't feel safe. That's what I mean, after what has happened. So I think what has to happen next is an understanding on Myanmar side that this is not just an issue of building facilities; it's about building trust. In the meanwhile, we need to support Bangladesh and the refugees, but also the communities that are hosting these refugees in Cox's Bazar and around Cox's Bazar. I think that's and I saw the message from the Secretary General this morning. I very much share his concern and his views on that. The Council, I think, has made some progress on Myanmar. We would have liked that discussion to have happened much, much earlier, already in the beginning of last year. But the situation as it is, we need to just keep up pressure so that we can achieve what I just said in terms of a dignified return and a dignified life for everyone in Myanmar, also belonging to minorities. The Council will, as I said, deal with this not later than 23rd of July. We've scheduled it, and that would be, I think, the fact that there is an envoy is a new positive step. I will have to listen to her as she comes back. And I hope there will be no need for any urgent new meetings on that, but that's important. On the Trump and Putin summit, yes, I mean, I think from a New York or Security Council perspective, it's been a problem that there has not been a senior level dialogue between some of the major powers in the world. I think that has contributed to life being more difficult in the Security Council and to deal with some of the conflicts. But, you know, from a Swedish perspective, we have our very strong views about Crimea, about security and the violation of international borders in Europe. So we cannot accept that there be any change in that position, including by our Western allies and partners, including the United States. So we hope that will not be the result of the summit. But if that can provide a better working climate more broadly in the world, I think that's to be welcomed. But let's see.
Okay, thanks. Edith.
Thank you very much, Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. 2 follow-ups and then a question. On July 9th, on the Children in Armed Conflict debate, who's going to be briefing? And on July 11th, on the climate and security risks, who's going to be briefing, and is there going to be an outcome? And I noticed, of course, that this month there's an open debate on the Middle East. I mean, one of the big issues is the announcement of the U.S. funding cut to the Palestinian refugees. Is the Security Council going to take up that issue? It's the 24th. Excuse me.
Yeah, UNRWA. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right, UNRWA.
Yeah. Okay. Let's take one more question and.
Matthew.
Matthew Lee, Inner City Press, on behalf of the Free UN Culture for Access. Thanks for the briefing. I wanted to ask you, maybe both the Myanmar and the Yemen meetings are both in the format of consultations, meaning closed door. So given that you said that you want to be transparent, can you explain, like, I guess I'd say why that is? Many people would think that it would be important to hear, whether it's from Mr. Griffiths or the Myanmar SRSG, in an open setting, what's happening. And I also wanted to ask you about an issue that's not on the agenda, but I think you're aware of, and it has to do with the situation in southern Cameroon. I know that there was a visit to Cameroon by the Council. Since then, things have actually gotten worse. Villages have been burned. There's tens of thousands of refugees in Nigeria. There have been people refueled back to Cameroon. I'm just wondering, I keep hearing from like France has said that they review it. They sent an envoy. The UK says it's reviewed it, but signed a natural gas contract with the government. As an E10 member and as the president this month, does it make sense to at least have some kind of an AOB, or why hasn't the Council at least heard from the Secretariat on the situation there? Thanks a lot.
Both of you. First on the briefers the question is about briefers on the 9th and on the 11th. The briefings on the children armed conflict is Virginia Gamba, the SRSG. It's Henrietta Fore, the executive director of UNICEF. And we are also keen, and you will see that this month there will be considerably more civil society briefers than certainly the month that has just passed. The one that will be on the open debate on children armed conflict is a disarmed FARC soldier under the name of Jenny Londoño, a young woman from Colombia. On the climate change and security, it's the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed. It's a Minister of Water and Resources of Iraq. It's still to be confirmed, but that's what we're working on. And it's also the Foreign Minister of Niger. Again, we're looking for some civil society briefers there as well. We have a name of Hindu Ibrahim, which is a representative of International Indigenous People Forum on Climate Change, and I believe she's from Chad. And you'll also see there'll be plenty of, I think, we're trying to ensure that half of the briefers are women during the month of July. Your question was also on UNRWA and...
Before you leave,
yeah.
the climate, are you expecting an outcome?
On climate?
Yeah.
No, we are not expecting an outcome on climate. The President will make a summary of the debate and circulate, but I think that's what we can do right now. You asked about UNRWA. Well, I think we've had Sweden together with Jordan and Egypt. We've organized several extraordinary meetings on UNRWA financing. There was one here in the UN last week with the Director General Krenenbühl from the director of the UNRWA, where there was a bit of a pledging conference where many countries have pledged. I think Sweden is massively supportive of UNRWA in terms of financing, but also in terms of having other countries step up. It's not just about solidarity with the Palestinian people. If that wasn't enough, it's also a fact of creating stability and future, positive future perspective of the Palestinians in the region. So I'm sure that will come up also on the 24th. On the openness, Matthew, you asked on the consultations and briefings. I agree with you that the normal rules should be for briefings to be held, but there is also an argument about effectiveness that I said before. I think if we sometimes, if we are just for the world expressing and showing all our divisions and nuances in positions, I think sometimes we lose leverage. So I don't mind at all, briefings being in the open so that everyone hears the situation on the ground. But I sometimes do believe that consultations are better held among ourselves, so for interactivity, etc. But so we're just trying to strike that balance. And as I said, even if we are meeting in close consultations, we will also always be available to speak to you about. What we find are the commonalities inside the Security Council. Right. Cameroon. Oh, on Cameroon, yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. It's a worrisome situation. And I believe there was, I missed it myself, but there was it was raised with Mr. Fall. I don't remember the date now. You were here, Carl, perhaps? Yeah. A week or two ago?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. So it's not that the Council has not been informed about it. There are some situations, such as the one in Cameroon, that we'll need to keep an eye on, and we are certainly ready to do that. It's just that we have not scheduled it right now, but whatever events on the ground that merits a Security Council debate, we are absolutely open to it. I also want to say that we are in constant conversation with the Secretary General and the Secretariat about this prevention agenda and how it's best dealt with between the Secretary General and the Security Council. The luncheon being one of those elements where we are asking the Secretary General to feel very free to bring up issues that may not be on the agenda, but that he sees merits a certain awareness or attention by the Security Council.
Okay, great. Thank
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador, can you confirm, please, did Sweden invite parties in Yemen to hold maybe negotiations in Sweden? And two, the situation in southern Syria. Like, we don't see that there is a sense of urgency in the Council about the situation, including Sweden and Kuwait. You were very active on 2401 in Eastern Ghouta when a military solution was taking place. So what do you have to say to people in southern Syria about the urgency of their situation in the Council?
Thank you. And Ambassador, best of luck with this month. I have two questions. The first one is about the debate on 11th. Can you please tell me the reason the Iraqi minister is invited and the relevance of the climate issue to the situation in Iraq? And the second one is about Iran. Will there be anything about Iran this month? And has the U.S. suggested anything with regard to the protest and the internal turmoil in Iran? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. On Yemen, no. What we're doing is simply to a constant conversation with Martin Griffiths and the Secretary General about their efforts. And as President of the Security Council, we've said that we are ready to play any part we can in support their efforts. That's where we stand on that. On Syria, we certainly agree with your description of the dramatic situation in Syria, and not least in the southwest. And I'm actually going to meet with Mark Lowcock just after we're finished here to have a briefing for me on the humanitarian situation there and elsewhere in the world. So, and we did raise it. I hope you heard Sweden raising it when we discussed with Staffan de Mistura only a week ago the situation there. So in the open meeting, so we are not letting go. And I think that is the message also to the Syrian population. It just reflects again what I started out by saying: the divisions, the failure of the Security Council to having dealt with the situation in Syria properly in the beginning, and also the disastrous humanitarian consequences of conflict. I'm sorry that we cannot fix it from one day to the other, but we're going to be very attentive to do what we can, including in the situation there and in Afrin, etc. Iran has not been. I'm not aware of any request for Iran to be raised, particularly by the United States or anyone else. Or on Iraq. Well, we have, as I said, we have been very attentive to countries' concerns when it comes to climate and security, and Iraq has presented this concern they have, and they apparently have a minister who is very vocal and very active on this, and so we thought that it's good to have a country that is on the agenda already to also explain this added aspect of a conflict situation that relates to climate. No, that's not the ambition at all. It's more the general concept of how climate is affecting also security challenges inside countries.
Okay, next question over here, please.
Thank you. Ambassador, the Conference on Children in Armed Conflict, will you be linking to that the number of children who are suffering among the migrants that are trying to escape from conflict in Africa, many of whom are drowning in the Mediterranean, and that very tragic situation, children trying to get into the United States? Well, you know how horrible that situation is. But many of them are trying to escape from countries which have had horrific wars. Many of those wars were instigated by the United States. So, that's I realize it's a dicey question, but it has to be dealt with.
Rhonda Haubin, and I'm a blog columnist at tots.de. Die Tageszeitung, and my question is something very special is happening on the Korean Peninsula. And I don't see the Security Council doing anything to give any positive support to it. And I'm wondering, is that, that the Security Council won't do that, or is there any thought, I wonder what Sweden thinks about this in terms of showing that there is a sense in the UN that we want peace, that this situation would be wonderful to be resolved, and there are many forces working towards that. Is there some way that this presidency can put some encouragement into that as well? Where do you see the support from the UN coming that would be helpful, because it's needed? And thank you.
Could I just ask a follow-up directly to that? As Joseph Klein of Canada Free Press, was there any discussion so far in your consultations on that subject regarding the possibility of easing sanctions in North Korea, as China and Russia have suggested? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I should take the DPRK question first. There has not been any, as a matter of fact, there has not been any consultations on the DPRK after the Singapore meeting. Sweden agrees that the Council should deal with issues not just when they are problematic, but also to encourage positive developments. So just to say that we are talking to the most concerned countries about how and when and in what way the Security Council and the UN can be most supportive for that process, which of course is quite remarkable compared to where we were 6 months ago. So I agree with you on everything you said. On the question of the children armed conflict, I'm sure that for us it's more about staging the general debate on this. We will or have issued some thoughts about to direct, to steer the conversation so that there's some questions to be put. I agree with you that children are affected not just as the bombs are falling over schools, but also in every aspect of the refugee situation, the migration situation, and that relates to my own continent, Europe, my own country, Sweden, etc. That is, of course, an important aspect of it. And who starts the wars that triggers all this? Well, I'm sure some countries will want to point the finger. For us, it's more important about making sure that we protect the children every way possible, and preferably just take them out of any conflict equation. So that's the approach we're taking to this. So what was it? Yeah. No. There has not been any discussion, as I said, after the Singapore summit or in consultations about easing sanctions that I'm aware of. There is the aspect of the humanitarian consequences of the sanctions that has been discussed in the sanctions committee, but that's a slightly separate issue, just to avoid any collateral effects and not unintended effects of the humanitarian on the humanitarian situation for sanctions.
Thank you, Ambassador Ali Barada from France 24 and the Sharq al-Awsat newspaper. So you don't feel compelled to do anything in the Security Council regarding the situation in the southwestern part of Syria, although there are waves of refugees, and obviously Jordan specifically is very concerned. And my other question is about Western Sahara, and whether you intend to talk to the special special representative of the SG regarding about his trip to the region and what has he done or achieved. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Just before I forget, and to come back because it's a follow-up question. As I said, we're very concerned about the situation in Syria and right now in the southwest. I'm seeing Mark Lowcock later on today in less than an hour. And we are talking also on various levels with the region, including Jordan. As a matter of fact, we'll have conversations with them on a very senior level later on this week. So, whether that leads to us calling an extra meeting on this already this week or not, I'll leave that open. I just want to come back to what I said before, that we are very responsive to any situation that presents itself. I just wanted to talk today more about the general work program as we have adopted it. But there needs to be adjustments based on the situation on the ground, and this may be one such situation. If we feel that a debate or a council consultation on it is effective, that it could actually contribute to a change on the ground, then we would be very inclined to call for it as soon as possible. On the special envoy, I saw his statement, I think, today, after his trip to the region. We are in contact with all the special envoys and special representatives to be attentive to their wishes if they want to come to the council or not. So I will probably contact him as well and see whether that's something that he would be served, that he feels that would serve his purposes. But right now there's nothing planned in the work program.
Thank you, Linda Fasulo. I represent NPR here. My question is this follow-up on North Korea. You've mentioned that you'd like to talk to various Security Council members about figuring out how the Council can be supportive of the North Korea summit. I was just wondering, has the U.S. or any other country, I mean particularly the U.S., suggested that the Security Council issue some kind of statement about the upcoming or even the past summit? And secondly, is there much resistance in the Council? Do you sense resistance among certain countries about doing anything?
The U.S. has not suggested for the Security Council to express itself on the summit or the results of that. I think there's just speaking as president, but also for my country, I think our position is that we want to be helpful, and that has to be So I think we wouldn't want to initiate something that wouldn't be helpful. So that's what I mean when I say that we want to listen to those who are most concerned right now, and for them to give the steer as to when and how and in what way the Security Council can be supportive. So there's no strong demand for the Council to act, then we're not going to impose ourselves.
But just following up on that.
And it's a moving target. I mean, I think we have to understand that there are, as you know, the U.S. is very actively thinking about the next steps, etc. I agree that there comes a point when the Security Council needs to be abreast of all that, but I don't know whether that's today or tomorrow or in 3 or 4 weeks' time. I just don't know. But I would leave it very much to those who are most active on it right now.
But just a little follow-up. Even a general welcoming, I mean, do you think there's support in the Council to even welcome the upcoming summit?
Look, I think that could be possible. But as you know, on the North Korean issue, there's a whole range of other aspects to this. So it's a pretty complicated file, and I think that's why also there's been some concern, maybe not to raise it in the Council for the time being, so as not to rock the boat. A boat which is going fairly stably now compared to what the rocky sea that boat has been on in the past.
And Charles, Baltic Review. In your national capacity, can you tell us how Sweden cooperates with NATO and the Baltic states of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia in terms of strengthening security in Northern Europe's Baltic Sea region? And how are you handling Russian aggression in the area?
Oh, I was here to talk about Security Council this month. I mean, I have to say that my focus is very much our agenda here in the UN and the Security Council. So I'm a little bit cautious to talk about the issues that you raised, because this is of course dealt with in Stockholm. But as you know, we are very close to the Baltic countries. They are members of the European Union as we are. Our relations with NATO are close, but we're not a member. We cooperate with NATO as much as we can, and where we find that it's in our interest. And as to the Russian aggression, we've been very vocal and very clear about that. And Russia knows exactly where we are, and we stand up for principle of international of security in Europe, and that means the unviolability of the borders, including in Ukraine, Crimea, and Georgia, and wherever else. So, we have a principled approach to this, but it's also based on our own interests. We do not condone or very wary of any efforts to change the borders in Europe or to use military force to impose oneself to protect minorities or under the pretext of protecting minorities in other countries. But I'll be glad to sit down with you separately on that, but you're better off just talking to the experts on Baltic policies in Stockholm, and I can put you in contact with them.
So.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.